Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It is a Sunday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes. Well, it's the morning at the moment, almost Sunday afternoon, and I'm joined by Chris McElwain. Because of the kick-off time, we won't have anyone else on the pre-match, but we will have Sean at half-time and full-time. It's St Johnstone versus Celtic. We're going to be looking at the teams in just a moment, Chris, but we have an opportunity today to take one step closer to 4 in a row. One step closer to this incredible level of domination that we have seen for a generation since 2000, trophy after trophy after trophy. It doesn't happen by accident. We were never given a cheat code. This comes down to so many aspects of the football club being run properly and so many of the right people being at the football club. And we're going to start off with the manager himself, Brendan Rodgers. How do you think he has approached this game in terms of the lineup? You've seen his start 11, Chris. There's obviously the change we spoke about all week. Nawrocki, I was saying that, he's going to be treated like scales. He's in. It's his jersey to lose. He's done nothing to lose it yet. Brendan disagrees. Trusty comes back in, and it's Carter Vickers and Trusty in the central defensive area. That's a big talking point. What do you make of the starting 11?
It's good. I think, given the levels of fitness, it's probably the strongest team we could have put out. The notable absence is obviously Kasper Schmeichel, but we're looking forward to seeing potentially another clean sheet from Sinisalo. Getting his opportunity to step up.
Your pal. What do you call him?
My pal, Vimy, as we know him now. No, he's as I said earlier in the week. He came across very, very well when he spoke, and there was a confidence about him. And certainly, there's no indication that he's doubting his ability to step up, which I thought was great, and it was certainly a privilege to speak to him. But I think that's not a change that worries me particularly, because we've done extremely well over the course of the season. We've had the odd blip now and then. I think that happens, and it can happen to any team, as we saw yesterday. Although I would hardly say that was an odd blip. I have noticed that it's getting a wee bit chilly around about the other side of the city. Could be minus 16 by the time tomorrow comes around.
Could well be.
Yeah, but look, take nothing for granted today. It's a strong lineup. I think the managers recognise that there's no room for complacency. So he's not taking this match and the opposition for granted. We've had a wee bit of fun over the last 24 hours at our rivals' expense, just a bit of light-hearted banter. But this could be the banana skin. You don't want that to happen. You don't, because to be fair, they'll be lining up to give us pelters if we don't manage to extend our lead back to the 16 today. So I don't think it's going to be an easy game. We've heard players talking about our slow starts in recent games. We saw first 10 minutes against Hearts, but we also saw the quality that we've got across the team, and I think particularly the front line. Today's gone with Jota, Kun, and Maeda. I think that is our strongest front three, and I think the midfield three of Hatate, Engels, and Kalmak, certainly based on what we've seen throughout the season, would appear to be the strongest combination that we can play. So it's a statement of intent from the manager, and I think until the title is over the line and done, it's the right statement.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that, and we'll go through the team individually throughout that. Obviously, we're starting off with your pal. Apologies, everybody. The clips were meant to be out yesterday. They will go out. I had a horrendous injury, Chris. Not skiing on the slopes of the Alps. Absolutely not cage fighting. I leant down to pick up my wee boy's apple from the floor, and something went. And that old age does not come by itself, my old granny used to tell me, and she was right. So, unfortunately, the last 24 hours have been agony, and I've not been able to do anything. But I'm back. I've made the comeback, and hopefully we'll get the clips out over the next 24 hours or so. We won't fire them out willy-nilly on the YouTube channel because, as Chris quite rightly pointed out, the way it's set up, it was a dial-in, therefore you can't actually hear the questions. We'll clip it up, we'll do the work, we'll do the legwork, and we'll put it out there on the socials as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Let us know what you think about Brendan Rodgers' decision to remove Nawrocki from the starting 11 and bring back in Austin Trusty. You'll remember the last time we were up at McDermott Park, Trusty played very well, I felt. On that particular night, we were in Gracie's Irish Bar at Candle Rigs in Glasgow. And the crowd, the sold-out crowd that came in that night, Chris, they were looking up at the big screen on the telly with Celtic playing St Johnstone and Perth. And they were looking at the co-commentator of Charlie Mulgrew, looking resplendent with that mane of hair and they were wondering how on earth he was going to be our guest in Grace's come full time. But we made it work. And on that particular night, we had Paddy Mullane, the young man, playing his first ever gig outside the island. In fact, it was the first time he was out of the island, first time he was in an aeroplane. And he came over and he played for us. And yes, his set was rather extended as Charlie Mulgrew broke records coming down the motorways to join us. So that was my memories of the last game. And I do recall on that particular occasion that Austin Trusty was one of the best players on the park. I think he was penalised at one point, and it was unfairly penalised. Now, we're getting the look at Reo Hatate, just looking at you there with the arms folded. He's a player that I feel still has a better, more vintage breakout season in him. That's not a criticism. That's just my belief in the player and the fact that he can be the guy that has that breakout season a la Jota before he left. Or Matt O'Reilly last season. He can have that breakout season. And I think that, the discussion coming into the game during the week that I had with JP, which actually got me thinking, almost changed my mind. That's why discussion and debate is so good, Chris. Other people formulate arguments for and against, and it makes you sometimes come round to their way of thinking. And JP had me thinking after Thursday that perhaps if Bernardo was to come into the starting 11, he could play that number 6 role, the pivot, the defensive mid, and that would allow Callum McGregor to go to a role that was very much familiar with him in his early part of his Celtic career, kind of drifting out onto the left-hand side of the midfield in a more advanced role, with Engels doing the same on the right-hand side, and trying to build that relationship between Sloop, the left mid, and Jota. It's not to be. Hatate starts the game. Is that the right move for you?
Yeah, I think it's like I say, I've said before, I think with the midfield options we've got, not just on the park today, but also on the bench, we see Bernardo and McCowan. They all offer something different to an extent. I don't think we've actually got that natural number 6, as the old football cliche said, that player who kind of sits in front of the defence and sweeps up a la Neil Lennon type player, which I always thought he refined to an absolute art form. But I think, what you get with a player like McGregor, for example, is he brings so much to the team on and off the park. And listen, he's not immune from criticism. There's been games where I think he's been targeted and maybe hasn't had the support of his teammates. I think there's been games this season where, despite, a fantastic scoring record this season, and we also see the loss when he's not in the team. But there have been times where he's, like other players, hasn't maybe had the heights that he himself would expect. But I still think that he's possibly one of the most important players in the team. I think when he clicks and when he's really on his game, I think everybody around him plays well as well. And you see how much he can influence a game. So you're hoping that whether McGregor is playing in the usual deeper role, or if he gets the opportunity to switch it out with Engels, for example, then, it'll influence the game, in a very positive way. With Hatate, I think he's just that kind of maverick, enigmatic type player. He plays in such a kind of advanced role. I don't think he's quite the number 10. He's not the guy that sits right behind the front men. But he kind of roams and he floats, and he's quite good at ball retention when he chooses to play that way. I think when we're on the front foot and teams are sitting back, he gets that opportunity on the ball to try and play those incisive passes, those defence splitting passes. And listen, that's not an easy skill. It's probably the toughest part of a creative midfielder's job. And so because of that, the success ratio is pretty low. When you get it right, you're either getting an assist or even potentially a goal. When you get it wrong, sometimes it can turn into a counter-attack for the opposition. So I do think you have to take the good and the bad, or the rough and the smooth, as the cliche goes with Reo Hatate. But as we've seen, he can be almost anonymous for 75, 80 minutes, and then he can be the best player in the park for the last 10 minutes. He's just got that ability about him. And I think that's why you see him in the lineup so consistently, because the manager's obviously got a trust that he can bring that into a game at any point. You take him off at 70 minutes, you might never get that breakthrough. But you keep him on, even though people, including me, sometimes are saying, get him off, get McCowan on, or get Bernardo on. But then he pulls up with a goal or a Hollywood pass and wins you the game. So there's a trade-off.
He's been first choice all season. I think, looking back at last season, Chris, when we go back to the early days of Brendan's return, I don't think he was sold on the Reo Hatate that he was presented with at that stage. As you say, that maverick player, what does that even mean? Well, it does mean that sometimes you're not in the game. He's not the guy who's at the forefront at all times, but when he clicks, that magic that he provides often is the type that no one else on the park can deliver. And what we've seen this season, I think, from Reo Hatate, probably if you were to look at the data, and it'll be interesting when Alan rejoins us for a wee look at this, is that across the campaign, because he's played so many minutes, it'll be interesting to see how consistent he actually is, not just on the eye test, but when it comes down to the facts and the figures, Chris, because we remember assists, we remember goals, and we remember on the flip side, sometimes the bad side, the bad passing or the ball over the bar and all this kind of stuff, the wild shooting. But sometimes what we don't see or what we don't recall so immediately is all the graft that he might be putting in, the amount of blocking tackles, the amount of tackles that's cutting through the back line and all this kind of stuff, turning, transitioning defence into attack. And it would be interesting to see a breakdown of that. And Alan Morrison's the man for it. But Brendan Rodgers has all the data available to them. They're tapping into that at all times. They've got the eye test, of course. They've got the attitude, the personality within the team. When you need somebody like, for example, up top, an Adam Maida, or when you need someone like Maida playing through the middle. So he can gauge all that, Brendan, and he sees them on a daily basis. And Hatate has been first choice all season. He's certainly turned around Brendan Rodgers' view of him, because Turnbull was ahead of him in the pecking order when Brendan Rodgers came to the football club. But I'm going to go back to Thursday, and I'm going to stand by my comment at the moment. I don't think we've seen the best of Reo. I think that there are maybe a couple of levels that he can go up in his football career, and I think that at least one of them should be done in a Celtic jersey. I think he can step it up, and if you think about some of the players that Brendan Rodgers has tapped into, Chris, and it's not just the gaffer, but certain managers can tap into a player. And I think he did it last year with Matt O'Reilly. And there was a lot of talk in the early part of the season about if Matt O'Reilly adds goals to his game, what a player he's going to be. That's going to put him up another level. So you go up that other level in a Celtic jersey. The unfortunate part, because you've got to take the rough with the smooth when that happens, the unfortunate part is you might lose a player because he stepped it up, and often he steps it up in the Champions League. So we've seen it with Matt. I think Reo can step it up in a Celtic jersey. It's all about consistency for me with Reo Hatate. Ball retention.
I think you've nailed it. I think we've seen the best of Reo Hatate, but what we've not seen it is throughout an entire game and actually over a course of games on a consistent basis. He reminds me a little bit in certain ways of Tom Rogic. Tom Rogic is a guy who, with moments in games, can transform the match. We saw it, and he's rightly lauded for it as a hero. I actually look back at his goal against Aberdeen.
Is Rogic a cult hero then? Is he more of a cult hero than a Gray or a
I would say so. Yeah, I think cult hero. I think you'll remember Tom Rogic for the brilliant moments, but you won't necessarily remember Tom Rogic for what he brought to an entire season. You remember him for the moments, and I mean that with the greatest respect to the player. Big fan of him. And I see Reo Hatate has been kind of in that mould at the moment. We'll look back and we won't say, well, Reo Hatate was the best player for the team throughout the season, but what we had is he gave us moments, he gave us assists. You remember the moments with the player. But I think you're right. I think in terms of Reo Hatate's development, what you want to see is him being someone that takes charge of a game, becomes that kind of midfield general a little bit, and becomes one of these players that week in, week out, you say he's one of the first names on the team sheet because throughout the game he's going to take control. And I don't think he's quite done that yet. I don't think he's quite developed the discipline for that yet. But we've seen in moments, sporadic moments, intermittent moments, that he can change a game, that he absolutely can change a game. So it's about bringing discipline, bringing consistency, bringing maybe a maturity to his game over the next couple of seasons, depending how long we have him. But you're right. I mean, as we've seen with Maeda and how he's developed, now the vultures are starting to circle, certainly as far as the mainstream media is concerned, and he's now getting linked with moves away because a lot of what maybe shielded us from the interest in Dyson Maeda, you're now starting to see that development in his game, forwards, clinical in front of goal, the consistency as well. It's the double-edged sword really when it comes to developing players.
It is, but you take it because you get the benefit of the fact that they click. And the one thing we used to say about Dyson, final product, If he had a final product, he wouldn't be in a Celtic. Remember, we used to say that. He wouldn't be in a Celtic team because that takes him to that next level. And Brendan Rodgers has tapped into that wee bit, the final product. And because he's playing through the middle just now, the final product's the shooting, the composure that he's shown. I mean, just look at that goal in the League Cup final. Unbelievable. 3 touches. If Bergkamp does that, it's one of the greatest goals ever scored. It's a world-class goal.
Absolutely.
Maeda does it in a Scottish League Cup final, and it almost goes under the radar beyond channels like this in the Celtic fan base. That goal was sensational. It showed so much composure, bringing about 3 touches, boom, and it's in. So he has added that aspect of his game. O'Reilly added the goals. Again, final product. He added the goals to his game. And then that second level that we talk about is ultimately a move to a bigger league, a league that is viewed as being a bigger league than the Scottish Premiership. The Scottish Premiership, I've got to point out that we top at this moment in time, and we do that with a cushion. I've got a cushion behind my sore old back after picking that apple. With a cushion of 13 points at the moment. As you quite rightly said, that could be extended to 16, Chris. I'm going to bring in all the comments before we dig in a wee bit further. Ian Roy, here we go. Oh, by the way, will Brendan Rodgers be wearing his suit, or is he going back to the CP company crew neck sweater? I've not seen any of the footage, Chris. I think it suits on at the business end of the season.
I missed it, to be honest. His interview was up, but I was concentrating on you, so I never actually picked up on what he was wearing. I've got to be honest. It depends, what era you're from. I always remember Martin Neal coming out, and Martin O'Neill, when he was on, doing punditry, he was always very well dressed. And then he comes out at Celtic, and he looks like a young Brian Clough. He's got the black tracksuit on, the jumper, and the white polo neck, and I just thought, he's a man that means business, so I don't really mind too much. Sometimes I think the suit can be a wee bit corporate. I always found that the arrivals were very much in a suit. I mean, you never saw Walter Smith without a suit on, and that sort of, kind of horrible dark blue, but I'm obviously biased,
And the brown brogues, of course.
And the brown brogues, so I always. The one I always liked, if you remember, was Tommy Burns. And you remember he had that green suit with a brown trench coat? It looked like an old style Frank Sinatra type look. And I always thought
the only thing missing was the hat.
Absolutely, and him singing Back the Knife. But I always thought Tommy looked like what you'd expect a top Celtic man and manager to look like. So I've got affection for both. You need to stop inviting me on, because we always end up talking about fashion. I'm the least fashionable guy on the entire planet, so I'm going to get a reputation here. But I think we did talk about the fact that Brendan, when he came out with the suit, he looked like he meant business. It was kind of like, we're getting to use that old cliche, we're getting to the business end of the season, so I'm going to dress to impress, and we're going to impress on the park. So that's the way I would take it.
Psychology. It's all about psychology. I always remember, though, you mentioned O'Neill, and I think you're right. Martin O'Neill took a lot of the good stuff from Cloughy. But the funny side of that is that Martin O'Neill actually managed the side, and a few of them obviously went into management. One of them, who had a very successful managerial career, but he's not managed for a while now, is Paul Lambert. And there was this thing, and it was because a few years ago, it's not as, covered, if you like, on the socials, etc. But it was happening right now. If every one of us would be on it. But Paul Lambert basically turned into Martin O'Neill. He turned into Martin O'Neill as a manager. He had the sleeves up on the jersey. He had a kind of rugby jersey underneath, a shirt underneath with a collar out. He had the socks pulled up over the trackies. And the worst one of all, because apparently didn't need them, even wore glasses. And I remember speaking to John Hart, Chris Sutton, that night. You were there in Glasgow, and they were like, he morphed into Martin O'Neill. He didn't even need glasses. There wasn't even any lenses in them. Obviously, they were embellishing the story. But yes, you take a wee bit from the gaffers you've worked under as well. Ian Roy, lineup is solid today. Got to be winning this by 5 minimum. Listen, I don't mind that at all, because you know what? I think there's a mentality, right? And that's not complacency, Chris, for me. That isn't. I think there's a mentality, and I think this mentality can be spoken about in terms of what happened with the fixtures and the results yesterday. Now, the Acsom group chat is something that's referenced a lot of the time. We need to find a way somehow to get some of these guys into the group chat. They'd love it. Anyway, there was a discussion, and I think it followed the last defeat against Rangers at Celtic Park. Sorry to bring it up. But there was a discussion, and I totally disagreed with one of the points that was made. But there was a few guys within the Acsom group who believed that Rangers aren't that bad. They're not as far away as we think they are. And this argument, and by the way, the people who made the argument will make the argument on the show. I'm not talking out of school here. Was based on the fact that they had beaten us twice and had scored 9 goals in 3 games against us in the last 3 games. And I was completely of the other opinion on this one, Chris. I really was. I just got to the point where I said, no, a good team. If they were a good team, they would win things, right? And when they come up against Celtic, and it was actually mentioned yesterday, they're the easy games. They're the games that you don't have to tap into a winner's mentality because they look after themselves, to use all the cliches. Them in the European games, you don't have to tap into anything there because it looks after itself. So there is a mentality within the Celtic side that will ensure that over a season, as can be illustrated this campaign, we win things. We're going for a treble. They're going for nothing. They're going for absolutely nothing. So I don't think that, they're closer than we think they are, or we give them credit for. You know what? We were murdered for 1.5 games against them. That's what it comes down to. And that, as you said at the top of the show, that happens, even with winning teams. You have all these wee anomalies, you have all these wee results. At the end of the day, when they're handing out the trophies, that shows you a good team. No, somebody who can get up for it in the big games, but can't take care of business when they're playing all the other teams in the Scottish Premiership. If you can't do that, you don't deserve to win anything. So that's where I am on it, Chris. And there's a few points coming through. Yes, we could go 16 clear. Plunge McNugget would have kept Nawrocki in the team. Trusty comes back in. I think he's just been married, going by his Twitter handle.
Yeah, looks like it.
So he's a busy man. Married, baby on the way. And Nawrocki, for me, he's come in, and I look at that bench now, Chris, right? And again, it's become a cliched thing, but it's because it's been so sparse recently. I look at that bench now and I think to myself, that's a strong bench. But I'll tell you what, credit to Brendan Rodgers that it's a strong bench, and I include Yang and Nawrocki in that comment. Because if you had asked me maybe 6 months ago, I would have said it's a strong bench apart from those 2 guys. And it's great that when they've come in, obviously it's on the player, but it's also on the manager. These guys, now you think to yourself, right, if they've got to come into this game today, I've no issue with that. And by the way, that's a win when you consider where they were maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's been good management over the course of the season, particularly the latter part of the season, where he's had to draw on players that maybe he wouldn't necessarily have considered in his long-term plans. But you have to, part of being a manager, I guess, is you have to be adaptable, and you have to manage the circumstances. Sinisalo, I think, was always intended to come in as an understudy to Kasper Schmeichel and eventually, step in. That's probably happened sooner than he would have expected, but he's taken his chance. With Nawrocki, the perception has always been, and we don't know this for sure, but based on what we've seen, the perception is that he's not one that really fits into the long-term plans and style for a Brendan Rodgers team. However, Brendan felt confident enough that he could bring him in, integrate him into the system, and get him to do the job that was required. And credit to Nawrocki, I think he did. To come in from the cold after so long. I know people will say, well, they're training and they're working every day, absolutely, but the mental sharpness and the familiarity and the muscle memory to play, doesn't come back immediately. But I think over the course of his appearances, he's done very, very well under difficult circumstances. So I think that's testament to the manager not being afraid to say, okay, I'm going to ask this guy to step up. I'm going to give him the chance because I need him to go in there. And player performed hopefully to the manager's expectations. And I don't think it's a reflection on his 2 performances. He's back on a bench now. I just think Trusty as a Brendan Rodgers signing and a Brendan Rodgers player, and he obviously likes the lineup. He's also a natural left footer, so there's the balance element there. When you talk about Yang, I thought maybe pre-December, I thought no chance. He's away in January. I'll hold my hands up and say that. Now, for whatever reason, the move didn't materialise, whether it was even in the frame. But what we have seen is we've seen a player that through sporadic, intermittent appearances, getting the odd cameo now and then, getting the odd opportunity. And what we're seeing is a player who is not necessarily setting the world on fire, but his trajectory is moving in the right direction. He's started to do the simple things well, which was something we bemoaned against Yang for not doing, was, not positioning yourself well, not doing the basics well. And now what you're actually seeing when Yang does come on is you see a player who's hungry, He's still a bit raw, absolutely. I mean, he's been nowhere near the level of, say, Jota and Kun yet. But you see a player who looks like he's continually improving. And I think, as a manager, is that not a great testament to the work you've been doing when you see your players continually improving and improving, even just the small tranches, but they're improving all the time. So, Yang, for me, has still got the opportunity to salvage something from his Celtic career. I have no idea if he will or not. I have no idea if the manager will be in favour of that or not. But I think that the player's got the opportunity now, because he will definitely get appearances between now and the end of the season. And if he continues contributing meaningfully the way he has been in recent matches, then who knows what can happen in the summer.
Yeah, it's one of the things, Chris. Maybe the end result of the Yang or the Nawrocki, can we even call it a renaissance? I'm not sure, because that's normally a comeback when they've done something in the past.
Yeah.
But if the result of that is that they are able to go out and play somewhere else and actually bring something back to Celtic into the coffers, because I'm looking at some of the guys that are out there at the moment, the likes of Palmer, the likes of Lagerbielke, who, whilst they're at Celtic, I'm not saying they were worthless, but their stock wasn't very high. They've gone out there, they're performing well, and they will get a move as a result of it. Maybe Yang, maybe Nawrocki are the next two to go down that path. And if that's the case, you wish them well, and they bring something back into the football club. The profile of these players obviously wasn't right when we signed them. Yang was, for all intents and purposes, a project player. When you look at the age profile of that young man, and the fact that we were well covered in the area in which he was meant to be pushing for a jersey. We brought in Yang at the same time we brought in Tilio. We brought in a number of wingers that particular season, and I wouldn't have put any money, Palma being the other one, of course, and later Kun, but I wouldn't have put any money on Yang being the guy that was still here, yet he is. No. So he's shown, obviously, from his side, Chris, what Brendan Rodgers needed, and that's a willingness to learn and adapt and develop, and because of that, he'll progress. Maybe not at Celtic. He might go down that route of Palma and the route of Lagerbielke, and that's fine. That's fine as well. But the fact that you see them on the bench at the moment and you don't mind that they're there, him, Nawrocki, and they've had game time, and if you put them in, they're going to be sharp enough. Again, it's testament to the manager and squad management, if you ask me. The rest of them, you look at the experience of Tony Ralston, you look at the experience of James Forrest, and even McCowan at this level, the experience that he had as a captain of a fellow Premiership football club. Then you've got Bernardo coming back. He's going to have that hunger to try and maybe get a jersey for the run in the business end. Suits on for the title, says Ian Roy. And then Taylor, experience. Ida, again, Ida's a player who has been up and down all season. I wouldn't put it past them to come on and make an impact today. We'll also have a look at the St Johnstone side. This is the side that we face. They've had a very difficult season. And let's hope, because I'm selfish, that it continues today. Fisher, Balladis, Mitchell, Griffith, Holt, Carey, Wright, Sidibe, Duke McKenna. What's with the hyphenated names? Never used to get that back in the day. Duke McKenna, Kirk, and Curtis. There you go. There's the starting 11. And again, it'll be, for me, and I understand why, I think it'll be about basically stopping Celtic playing again. This is a type of game where St Johnstone, and they're obviously at the depths of the Premiership at this moment in time, will be looking for a bit of a damage limitation, knowing that if Celtic were to click, we can, on most occasions with most teams in this division, and we've shown it against the likes of Aberdeen, who are sitting fourth in the league, we can take 5 or 6 goals off you if we click and another team are not on it. And I think because of that, we're going to see the usual in terms of a team that's just trying to stop us play. And you've got to do that, because when you get to this stage of the season, Chris, where every point's a prisoner for St Johnstone, what they don't want is to be on the wrong end of an absolute humping today against Celtic, because it may affect the momentum for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's nothing more dangerous than a winded animal, and St Johnstone certainly fit that bill. They've actually had a couple of positive results in recent weeks, kind of up and down for them, but they're not on this consistent losing run that they were maybe earlier in the season. So we can't take anything for granted. We've got to respect the opponents. As both the manager and some of the players have said, we've got this tendency to start slow in some games. I think we have to try and manage that. I don't mind if we're not necessarily in the front foot straight away, but what we should be trying to do is this transition from defence to attack whenever we get the chance, and utilise the assets we've got up front, like Maeda, Jota, Kun, their invention, their ability to, get in behind and make something happen. But yeah, you hope that, being buoyed by the result yesterday, the opportunity to really go back to 16 points clear and take one more step towards the title, which we can win at Paradise, in the next game. So the almost, I hate to quote him, but from Barry Ferguson's press conference, the one thing he did say that resonated is, there are games that you must motivate yourself for outside of the obvious. And I don't think that applies for the chasing pack. It also applies for or doesn't just apply for the chasing pack. It applies for the Celtic manager. Being 13 points clear, there must be a challenge to stay motivated, to keep the levels high. But they need to do it because, every point counts, even at this stage in the season.
Yeah, and we're about to kick off, and the suit is on. I can confirm because I've just seen it. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. We'll be back at half time, so please join Chris McElwain and myself on a Celtic State of Mind.
Come on, Hoops.